Hey, can you guys hear us? I cannot hear you.
Okay, can anyone hear me now?
I can hear you now, Danny.
Yes, you're
Awesome.
good. We can hear you.
Okay, then we're going to start over. I hadn't clicked one button. Too many buttons. All right, so let's go back to the first screen. And where I was jabbering over here is that this presentation I did upload to Paperless Pipeline, and this is being recorded. So it'll be up on the YouTube channel as soon as they give it to me, and I'll post it up there. So we'll get started right away. There are two objectives. And what we're going to learn today is the new rules that have now become commonplace as of Saturday, and the new forms. What are they? And actually, there will be continuation of modification of forms and even new forms being developed. But we'll talk about the ones we can start using now. So we'll start with August 17th, which was Saturday. Now, for us who are members of MetroTex or any one of the boards up here in North Texas, we have been using the new forms really since June 24th. And they being the board, did some modifications last week, and those new modified forms will become available to us this coming Friday, August 23rd. And we'll talk about those forms and go through them and show you where the changes are and how to fill them out. So what are those actual rule changes? Here they are, and these are important. So these two charts are the ones that you might want to keep. So the first one and the second one are basically the same rule change. It's just a different target. It is targeting MLS and it's targeting the agents, us. So I'll just read number 2 because this one applies to us. Eliminate and prohibit MLS participants, subscribers, and sellers from making any offers of compensation in the MLS to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives. So how that impacted us here at Netris is the BAC disappeared from all listings July 29th. If you weren't aware of that, if you try to go in and find any, they're gone. So we can no longer do that. It's not even an option for us to put into your listings. What it also means is that when you try to perhaps put information into the remarks section, either private or public, MLS is monitoring all transactions that are put into the system, being MLS. And if they find something wrong, they will notify you and they'll notify the office. And if we see it here, we will change it immediately. You cannot use the terms compensation or commission anywhere in the remarks or anywhere in MLS. So some of the ideas that have been told not to happen is don't try to, for example, have a picture that is posted in the MLS of maybe your sign that's in the front yard that says 3% BAC. Don't do that. Don't try to hide, for example, the commission BAC in another picture. Let's say you've got a nursery and your kid has those building blocks and you put 3% BAC in the picture. Don't do it. Just don't do it. There are people who are now monitoring, and they being MLS is responsible for monitoring these transactions. And if they see that you are circumventing the rules, they will notify you, and there possibly could be fines. So pay attention to how you input your listings, okay? The third rule is require the MLS to eliminate all broker compensation fields and compensation information in the MLS, which they have done. Now, you might have seen a new field. If you're inputting a listing, all the different tabs at the top, the one that says finance or financial, in that tab, there's a new field that says seller concessions, yes or no. And that is what has been added. So you can imply that your seller is offering a concession by toggling it yes, not that you won't continue to get phone calls to say, well, how much are you offering? But if you did say no, then it also tells the agent you're not offering seller's concessions. So that was the compromise, we'll call it. That's rule number 3. Rule number 4, require the MLS to not create, facilitate, or support any non-MLS mechanism, including by providing listing information to an internet aggregator's website for such purpose, for participants, subscribers, or sellers to make offers of compensation to buyer's broker or other buyer's reps. So what they're saying is I use the term, Amazon's not going to come up with a website that you can pay to put your BAC on, okay? But what the Department of Justice has stated is that broker websites can have their listings, obviously, and on our broker website, on our listings, we can put compensation numbers. Okay, so we're working through that because remember, United is a big company. We've got 24,000 agents across 42 or 43 states. So they've got to come up with all the rules for all the states, and eventually they will give us ideas of what we can do. Okay, but that's rule number 4. Rule number 5, actually, before I go from rule number 4, if you're thinking, let's say Highland Homes or Normandy Homes, sorry, new home builders are immune from the NAR lawsuit because new home builders were not necessarily members of NAR. And because of that, they are not beholden to these rule changes. So if you go to like a Highland Homes website or a Normandy Homes or DR Horton, whomever, you will probably see that they are showing what the compensation is. And again, because they are not impacted by the rule change. The other set of rules, number 5, some of these are legalese for the same rule, just rephrased. Number 5, or number 1 again, sorry. Prohibit the use of MLS data or data feeds to directly or indirectly establish or maintain a platform of offers of compensation from multiple brokers or other buyer representatives. Such use must result with the MLS terminating the participant's access to any MLS data and data feeds. So there's where they're telling you they are watching us. Don't do it because they could eliminate you from accessing MLS, which would be a death knell for you as an agent. Number 2, reinforce that we as agents must not, and MLS must not enable the ability to filter out or restrict listings based upon the BAC. Well, believe it or not, ever since I can remember, I couldn't filter out with Metro Texas. I've been a member with my whole career here for the BAC, but apparently some MLSs across the country did allow that to happen. And they're now saying you can no longer use the BAC to filter listings. Number 3, require compensation disclosures to sellers and prospective sellers and buyers. That's our listing agreement, which we have here in the state of Texas. So that really was just reemphasizing what we already do. And number 4, require participants working with the buyer to enter a written agreement with the buyer prior to touring a property. So many of us have been really good about that. I will be honest, in this situation where when I was out buying and selling homes with my clients, I did not have them sign a buyer's rep agreement until I wrote the first offer. So I'd show them 10 homes, 20 homes, and that's just how I conducted my business. I can no longer do that. I can no longer open a house for a buyer and show it to them without a buyer's rep agreement. And we've got a couple more slides on that, and we will talk about the long form and the short form, which is what we call the buyer rep agreements. So the next 3 slides I have revamped from the original presentation. What the colors mean here. The yellow colors mean this was originally updated June 24th and is being re-updated or modified August 23rd. So you see 4 on this slide have been remodified as of this coming weekend. The one that's green, TXR 1409, what that's saying is that was not modified back in June, but it is modified now, starting Saturday, the intermediary relationship notice. And what that modification means is I think that's the one that actually has 2 words added to it, but we'll look at it. So in a sense, the listing forms, there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 forms on Zip Forms or TexasRealEstate.com or Instanet, wherever you go to get your forms that have either been modified or will be modified, okay, this coming Saturday. That's the listing side. Now, before we go to the buying side, I want to make a point of clarification. There is Trek over here on the left, and then there are what I call Texas real estate or ZIP forms on the right. ZIP forms have updated a lot of these forms, okay? TREC only meets a couple times a year, right? So they don't move as fast. So I get a question every now and then, can I use the 1-4 contract that's dated from 2022? Yes, you can, because that's the latest one. So the original TREC contracts, like the 1-4, or the condo purchase, or the unimproved property purchase, those are still valid, okay? Because TREC hasn't updated them yet. But the ones that are on ZIP forms that are not TREC documents, but are more Texas Realtor or TAR, you need to be using the most recent dated ones, which are 624 or greater, for the ones on the 3 slides I'm about to show you. So here's slide 1. Slide 2 is the buying side. So again, the yellow means the documents were updated 624, June 24th. The green means, in this case, notice from buyer's agent to seller that has been modified for the first time in a long time, starting August 23rd. So we'll talk about many of these and go through them. Then there were 4 new forms added, created brand new. And again, this one, yellow one, was updated on August 23rd, which is Saturday, or really Friday, but it'll be probably put up into this forms on Saturday. The other 3 were not remodified since June. Okay, so that means there's a total of about, if my math is correct, 20 or 22 forms that have been either modified or created brand new. So some quick facts. Okay, this is the email that I sent out yesterday to any of you who have a listing that is not closed. And it also applies to a buyer's rep agreement. So what I want you to do is when you look at your, I can show you this here. Okay, I don't know if I can see this here, but this is just the first page of the exclusive right to sell, the listing agreement. Right here on the bottom left is the date of when this document was created. And this one is dated August 23rd of 24.
I don't see it.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm just telling you, look on the bottom left
Okay.
of the screen, okay, of the document, and you can see that, okay? So just look at the contracts. Look at the contracts. Every contract has a date on the bottom left, okay? It'll say like TXR 1101, and then it'll have a date beside it.
I only see your PowerPoint. I'm sorry, I only see your PowerPoint.
I'm asking you, looking at your document, if you've got one.
Oh, okay. You're not sharing your document. Okay, that's fine.
I will in a second. I will in a second. Just give me a few minutes. We're not quite there yet. But if your document is not dated at least 624 for the listing agreement or the buyer's rep agreement, these are the steps that you need to take. And most of you already have the 624. I appreciate you letting me know that. But if you didn't, it's a single page, and we'll go over the document. It's a 2701. All this document is doing is saying the listing agreement or the buyer's rep agreement you signed before 624 is now brought to current status, okay? All right. Okay. Now let's go to, give me 1 second. I think I missed a page. Here we go. Required by the settlement. Required by the settlement. Number 1, you must have a written agreement before you tour a home, which includes virtual tours. Okay. So if you think you can say, well, I didn't have a buyer with me, I'm just going to go in and show them the home with my camera. That is no longer valid. You must have a buyer's rep agreement before you tour a home. And be aware that MLS has spotters or plants or spies because they have to enforce these rules. So you may get a call from an unknown buyer to say, hey, I'd like to see a house. Can you show it to me? And you show up and you ask them to sign the buyer's rep agreement. And they say, well, you know, no, I don't really want to. I don't feel comfortable. And you open the door and you show it to them. Then they go away and they call the office to say, hey, Danny Elm showed me this house at 123 Main Street. Why don't you ask him for his buyer's rep agreement? So they call the office and they ask me, and if I don't have it, it's a possible $1,000 fine. $1,000. So the question is it worth $1,000 to open the door for a potential buyer? Because if they won't sign the buyer's rep agreement, don't open the door. Okay. Then the question comes up, well, what if it's my listing? Okay. Well, if it's your listing, you're working on behalf of the seller. And if you're working on behalf of the seller, then you don't have to have a buyer's rep agreement. You're working on behalf of the seller. But if you turn that conversation into where you're giving them advice and trying to turn them into a buyer, then you better get a buyer's rep agreement. So if you even think about it, don't do it. Okay. I can't emphasize that enough. But you can show your listings and you don't have to have a buyer's rep agreement for an open house. Okay. Very important. What do the requirements also include? Agreement must disclose the amount or rate the realtor will receive and how this amount will be determined. Okay, we've done that for years. No big deal there, but the second bullet is important. Compensation cannot be open-ended, which means you can't say 2 or 3% or based upon the price of the house. You can't do that. And we'll go through that document so you'll understand it better. Now, the third one, also important, realtor cannot receive compensation for brokerage services from any source that exceeds the agreement. So the question always comes up, as it should. You sign a buyer's rep agreement just to get them to sign it so they're comfortable signing it, and they sign at 1%. Okay? But you find them a house that's paying 3%. Well, your agreement only says 1%. So if you don't do something, all you can collect is 1%. So what do? You amend your buyer's rep agreement to say you're eligible to earn 3%. Okay? Or if you do the opposite of that, where you sign up for 3% and you find a house that's only paying 2%, if you don't amend your buyer's rep agreement, that means you can collect 2% from the seller, in my example, and 1% from the buyer, for the total of 3%. Many of us for years have just forgiven the other 1% for the buyer, but now you need to tell the buyer, I'm forgiving the other 1%, amend it down to 2%. So you can amend up or down, but you've got to amend to make a match.
I was wondering if a builder was you put 3% in your buyer representation agreement, but you're selling a new house and the builder agrees to give you 4%. Are you allowed to accept that extra percent?
You are if you amend your agreement. And actually, that's one of the 2 blanks on the buyer's rep agreement, amending it, that I'll go through. But yes, that's a great question. You can accept more. You just have to get your buyer to sign off on it.
Danny,
Yes.
just to circle back, you made a statement that the compensation must be disclosed, like an agent can't say the commission depends on the offer. Like we're offering up to 3% depending on the offer.
Well, that's not what I was implying. I was probably saying it on the buyer side.
Okay.
What my sister and I are planning on doing when we do have listings is we will get with our seller to determine how much they will offer. Okay, and let's say they'll offer 3%, right?
Yes.
If I get and I will get phone calls, we all will, right? And I plan on kind of phrasing it as follows. I'll say, send me your offer. Yes, we are offering sellers compensation. You send me your offer and I will run it by my seller, because just like everything else on the 1 to 4 or condo, whichever one you're using, any blank is negotiable, right? Any blank is negotiable. The option fee is negotiable. The closing date's negotiable. The seller's concession is negotiable. So let's say, for example, I tell them, send me your offer, and they put, and let's say the house is selling for $300,000 to make it easy. And my seller has agreed to offer up to $9,000 at 3%, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they send me over a offer that says they want $9,000 in seller's concessions. And they say, but I'm only going to offer you $270,000, not the $300,000 you want. I'll give it to my seller and I'll say, okay, let's strike the 9%, $9,000 out. Let's put $6,000 in there. And let's strike the 270 out and recounter at 285. And I will counter back and forth. until we come to an agreement. Now, if they send it over at 9,000 with a full offer price, I bet you my seller will sign it. But if they come back and say, but I want all these repairs done, then I'm going to negotiate down. That's just how I'm going to run my business. Each of you as agents are able to decide how you want to run your business and how you want to answer that question. Some will say, I don't want to deal with that stuff. I'm offering 3%. Send me your offer.
Right. Well, I've just gotten conflicting statements. I know we all have. There's so much influx right now, but we're all learning as we go here. But I've had agents say, like, you have to tell us what it is. You can't.
No, you don't. No, you
So
don't.
that wasn't my understanding. So, like, yeah, okay.
No, it's like if they'd ask you, think about in the past, if they'd said, Andrea, send me your listing agreement.
Right.
No. Did I ask you for your buyer's rep agreement? So no. But anyway, you're talking about us learning. It's really, if you think about it, there are 3 different entities that are learning together. We as brokers, the lenders, and the title companies. And I've already been working with a couple different brokers and a couple different title companies and lenders saying, which of the documents do you require? And until we've got a couple of weeks and months under our belt, I think we'll see a lot of different answers. And because it's going to be difficult for, as an example, title companies sitting there trying to make everything match, right? They no longer have the MLS to look back on to see how much the BAC is. So they're going to say, well, how do I match these numbers up? And they're going to say, well, where's your compensation agreement between brokers, for example? Just as one example. And I've created a new slide to help you guys understand which documents might be required at title.
Okay. Well, like I have a listing agreement right now in place. The seller is willing to pay 3%, but she also said in the same breath, it kind of depends on what sort of offer we get. So am I locked into giving 3%? And
No, you're not.
I said no. So, okay, great.
Nope. No, you're not, because until you sign, for example, the compensation agreement between brokers or and that's the and we're going to go through that form. The compensation agreement between brokers is signed by the 2 agents.
Right.
And then the addendum between buyer and seller, I'm sorry, the addendum regarding brokers' fees is signed by the buyer and the seller. So everybody's on the same page. So what I tell our buying agents when they come in here and talk to me, I say, you better get that compensation agreement between brokers, because if you say, well, verbally, they told me they're going to give me 3%, I'm going to say, prove it, right?
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So rest assured that your seller does not have to pay 3% until they sign off on that.
Got it. Thank you.
But wouldn't they send the compensation between brokers with the offer if they send the offer over? And then
sure might.
Because the offer I got in, they sent it with the offer, the 3%.
Yep, that's going to happen. And so I wouldn't sign that until, I'm going to put myself on the seller's side first, because I would definitely send it over with my offer as a buyer's agent. Absolutely. So let's talk about the seller side first. So you get the offer and you get the compensation agreement between brokers, and you put that in front of your seller to say, okay, do we agree to this? And if you do, sign it, sign them both. If you don't, counter offer, strike it out just like you normally would, and send it back with your initials on it, see if they agree to it. That's what I would do. Okay. Now, also over the couple of years that I've been working in this office doing contracts, we see it happen often that as you get closer to the final closing, maybe some of the agents have to give up some of their compensation, or the seller has to give more or less. That could happen. As let's say they give you a full price offer and agree to 3% on the compensation agreement between brokers. Then they being the buyer send over the repair amendment, and they're asking for the moon. Well, the seller can choose not to do anything. I'm not doing any of them. And then the buyer terminates. And so they're off the hook, right? Or the seller counter offers with the repairs that they will do, okay, and try to keep it at 3%. Or they say, we will make these repairs, but we want to amend the compensation agreement between brokers down to 2.5%. And it's all negotiable. I know it's not easy. It's not. It'll take a while of cycles to understand all the changes, but that's what we're going to have to do.
I'm glad you shared that. Thank you.
You bet.
Do you have to have a buyer broker agreement to register somebody with a builder?
If you are representing a buyer, the answer is yes. Because MLS, because think of it this way, you're going to be putting those documents into paperless pipeline in our case, right? If you're representing a buyer to purchase a home, then you need a buyer's rep agreement. Bottom line. Hate to say it, but that's the rule. Okay.
Hey, Danny, I'm sorry to bother you.
Oh,
Sorry.
it's okay.
So is it 2402 or 2406 that we're supposed to be submitting with our offers?
Well, is that Marissa Zoda?
Yes, it is.
I recognize that voice. Okay, 2402 is compensation agreement between brokers, okay? You're going to use that one if you've got two brokers involved. And I would send that as a buying agent over to the listing agent, absolutely, along with my offer, because what could happen is you think about a 1-to-4 contract today, right?
So you said 2402, right?
Yes, 2402.
Okay, perfect.
2401 is the compensation between broker and owner. That's a FSBO.
Right.
FSBO. Yep.
And what about 2406? That one's also, isn't it a
2406. Which one is that? That one is the new one. Addendum
Yes.
regarding broker fees. Yes, we're going to talk about that one. That
Okay.
is signed
Sorry.
between. No, it's okay. That's signed between the seller and the buyer, where the 2402 is signed by the two agents. Because, for example, you could have the need for the seller and the buyer to agree to that, right? Let's say, for example, it's really more on the buyer side, the buyer's rep side, right? Because if I'm the buyer and my agent has convinced me to put 3% on the buyer's rep agreement, I'm technically on the hook for 3%. If I'm buying a $400,000 house, that's $12,000, right?
right?
So I'm scared to death that I'm going to have to pay him $12,000. So I want to make sure me as a buyer are off the hook so that 2406 is what is used to convince the buyer, or not convince, but really alleviate the buyer's concerns that, yes, I am charging you 3% on the buyer's rep agreement, but look here, the 2406 has been signed by the seller that they are giving me 3% commission. And
So, yeah, I'm confused on the 2406. I know you're gonna go over them, but I'm just still confused and I can't wrap my head around 2402 and 2406. But I did submit 2402 when I did my offer today, so. All right, thank you.
You bet. Give me a few minutes and hopefully I can give you more examples and we'll get through it. Okay. All right, the next one is just a couple of resources. I just added the bottom one here. I've been putting some videos up on my YouTube channel, and believe it or not, I never intended to be an influencer or anything like that. Don't care, not from that generation. But my videos have now been watched by people who aren't even with United, and I'm getting phone calls from people not with United. So maybe I'll get a penny or two from YouTube, who knows? All right, let's look at the forms, okay? I stole one of a term from a book, The Art of the Deal. I said the two sides, which documents might I need at title? So this is what I've been putting in my head going, okay, which side am I on? And what documents might I need just to do the compensation, right? So if we look at the listing side first, on the left side, the first thing you got to do is get that listing agreement. That's simple. We go get the listing agreement, okay? If we're lucky, we don't need the amendment to listing. Now, why would I put the amendment to listing? So let's say, for example, you do the listing agreement and your seller's one of those, and believe it or not, I got a call today from one of our agents. She says, her seller says, I just heard on the radio, I no longer have to pay a buyer's commission. I don't want to do that anymore. And the commission was set at 5 and 2. 5 and 2. 3 for them, 2 for us. So the amendment to listing was redone to say 2 and 0. Okay. So you may have to do the amendment to listing. And the main reason you'll do the amendment to listing is the numbers have to match a title, okay? But you might be lucky and just get away with it not having to have the amendment to listing. The next one that you might have to have on the listing side is a compensation agreement between brokers. I think that's more important over here on the buyer side, because on the listing side, you've got the listing agreement here with the owner saying you're going to get paid X. So you're covered, right? But the compensation agreement between brokers is really for this side over here, the buying side, because the buying agent really has no proof of what the listing agent is going to pay them unless they have the compensation agreement between brokers. Okay, so I put it on both sides. And then the last one on the listing side is the one Marissa was asking about, 2406, the addendum regarding broker fees, okay? And the biggest difference between 2402 and 2406, they're kind of the same document. The 2402 is signed only by the agents rectifying the compensation, or ratifying really. The 2406 is signed by the seller and the buyer saying, yes, we've agreed to these numbers. Okay. So those are the 4 possible compensation documents you might need on the listing side. Now on the buying side, a little bit more, because first thing, you know, you've got your buyer, you can't open that door yet. So you either have the long form, which is 1501, or you have the short form, which is 1507. And I've been reviewing some documents. I'm seeing the short form comes in. You guys are filling that out correctly, so great job. The long form is really the old buyer's rep agreement, not a lot of changes there. So you've got your buyer rep agreement. And if everything goes well, you don't have to do the 1505, but you may have to amend the buyer's rep agreement because let's say your buyer initially signed up for 0.5 and you've got them a house for 3, or you've got a bonus from a new builder. Well, you want that bonus or you want that additional compensation. So you have to amend the buyer rep agreement, the first 2, with the 1505. We'll go over that. Then there's the 2402 again that we talked about on this side, 2402. And again, the buyer's agent is going to send that probably with their offer. I would. But you know what's funny? We had an agent in this office either a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago. I told them from the listing side to go ahead and send the compensation agreement between brokers to solidify it. And our agent was actually selling their own house. And the other broker says, no, we don't need that document, being the 2402. It's like, okay, that's that broker's choice. And we went from there. Because that broker said all requires the 2406. So what I'm putting down for you guys there is that each broker may have their own different rules to start.
When should you use the long form and short form? Does it make that much difference?
Good question. Okay. The short form is really for showings, okay? So to give yourself the maximum protections, if you think this buyer is going to be a long-term buyer of yours and you're going to show them multiple properties, maybe multiple weeks, and you're going to write the contracts up and negotiate the repairs, you should go ahead and do the long form, okay? Not that the short form doesn't offer those services, but the short form was really designed so that you don't know what relationship you're going to have with the potential buyer. You're meeting him for the first time at a house. And again, you can't open that door without them signing something, right? It has to be signed. Could you imagine putting a 5-page document in front of a buyer at the door and saying, I need you to sign this? No, I don't think that's going to go well over with the buyer if this is your first conversation with them and they go, well, what's this 3% on here I have to pay you? And you see you're going to go down a rat hole. So the short form was to help with those situations where really you don't know where the relationship with the buyer is going to go, or you're meeting them for the first time at a house. Or let's say, for example, there's an agent right here in our office. I was talking to him in the break room not an hour ago. He's over here in Dallas with us. He's got a listing in Fort Worth. He doesn't want to drive over to Fort Worth, and it's on the southwest side of Fort Worth. That's a long drive. He said it's 56 minutes on a good day. So he puts out on Facebook, can anybody open a door for me? Okay, I'll pay you $50 to open a door. Well, you're working on behalf of the buyer, so you need to have a buyer's rep agreement, and the short form allows you to open that door and show that house. Okay, that's a major difference between the two, and we'll go over both of them. All right.
Do you need the short form if it's a lease? If you're showing lease homes?
You need some kind of form for a lease as well.
Okay.
Leases are not immune. Sadly, they are not immune. You never know if that might change, but right now they're not immune.
So the short form has to be signed by just the buyer rep, not the person that's showing the home?
Well, the agent who's showing the home also has to sign it.
Okay, so both, okay.
Yeah, the agent and the buyer. Yep. And we'll go through the short form because there's some good information on there, and it is a good little document. There's just some caveats to it. Okay, so I said, where can I find these modified forms? Okay, so I don't know how you get to zip forms. Maybe you go through MLS or Netris to get there. I just go to texasrealestate.com. And then I click it. I'm going to show you how to do this, but here is the step-by-steps on how to get to them. So you got the slide there. You can remember, you can take the picture, but I'm going to show you how to get there because next thing we're going to do is we'll go through a live tour of modified slides. So let's see. Hopefully y'all can see where I'm going. Okay. All right, let's go here. Are y'all able to see a new slide or new screen that says Texas Realtors?
No.
Okay, let's go share. See if I can share my screen. Okay, entire screen. Share. What about now? Are y'all seeing anything? It says I'm
Yes.
screen.
Yes, yes.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. So I just said I went to texasrealestate.com and you can see I'm logged in. There's hi Danny. And over here behind Mercedes' picture, it says zip forms. So I'm going to click on this red button here for Realtor members. Okay. And then I'm going to scroll down here. Look at that. Don't want to look at that ever. Legal facts. I'll go to forms. Okay. And then I go from forms. I scroll down a little bit. Form changes. Okay. Review proposed and recently adopted changes. So you can go in here at any time. We're going in here now because of the NAR changes, but they're always updating their forms. And you can always see what's going on from which forms. See, look at this. Visit the new forms, visit the forms under revision, which is 0 right now because they're coming here. Okay. So view the adopted form changes. And again, I put up on Paperless Pipeline so you can find them easy. The 11 forms that were modified that's coming Friday, Saturday, they're up there in one single packet, okay? But here they all are. See, August 15th is when they were officially modified, and they're going to go live August 23rd, okay? All right, so, and here they are all together with their little numbers and their names. And we'll go through them, but I just want to go down here to June 7th, okay? There's the ones that were modified June 7th, but were not modified August 15th. So originally there was 18 documents on this list, but several of them, these 11, are now pushed up here because they've been modified again. All right, so why don't we do this first? We're going to do a listing first. So I'm going to go, the good news is 1101, 1102, and 1201 are practically the same document, okay? And I built a little cheat sheet. And I'm going to click on this one. All right, so let's go to the top. I don't know why it always starts at the bottom there, but how you remember the two colors. Red means they're taking it out. Blue means they're adding it. Okay, red's taking out, blue is adding. So the first page that is going through a modification, and see, I mentioned earlier about the date. Again, here is 1101, exclusive right to sell. See how this says 1101, it said 624.24? That was when it was originally modified. It's now going to be modified on 823. So you need to ensure your listing agreement is at least 624.24, or you've got to get the one-page modification done. That's where you find the date. Not the date it was signed, but this date here of the contract. Okay. So let's look at page 2. Remember, red taking out, blue they're adding. So put your listing hat on for a second, okay? And let's read through this. Broker's compensation. And this first paragraph here is stated over and over and over again. It's ad nauseum that they put it up so many times. So I'll read it the one time here. Broker compensation or the sharing of compensation between brokers is not set by law nor fixed, controlled, recommended, or suggested by the Association of Realtors, MLS, or any listing service. Broker compensation is fully negotiable. Brokers independently determine their fees. Okay. Then it says complete either 5A or 5B only. So not both of them, A or B. So what's the difference between A and B? Let's scroll up a little bit. A is a more difficult one. So let's look at B first. Okay. Broker's fee without compensation for the other broker. So what I'm telling you here is you've got the listing and you've got that seller that says, I'm going to pick on Pamela Drake because I can see her right now. It says, Pamela, I'm not paying you or Philip any money to pay the other buyer. No way, no how. They're on their own. Okay. So I would click this little box here, that 5A box, and I'd put my little thing right there. And I would say, how much are you going to pay me to list your house? So maybe they're going to give Pamela and Philip 2%. I'd type in 2% right there. And that's what they're going to pay United to sell their house. Or they could sign up for a flat fee. You see, this is what the change was right here, because it was a little confusing. So they tried to make it more clear. You can either charge a percentage of the sales price or a flat fee to list that house if you're not paying the other broker to bring you a buyer. Okay. Now, what's this paragraph B? Well, maybe they're paying you something other than cash or a percentage. And if you've heard any of the other calls I've done, it's a true story. My sister and I were trying to pick up a listing out in Farmers Branch way back in 2018. And they had an old Pontiac Firebird in the garage. And they said, whoever lists our house and sells it gets that Pontiac Firebird. Unfortunately for us, we did not get chosen as the listing agents. But that's where something tangible like an asset would be placed. Maybe they're going to give you the Rembrandt that's hanging over the fireplace, right? Never know. Okay, but that is no compensation to the other broker. But 5A is the more difficult one. Okay, it's not hard. It's just understanding what it's saying. Okay, so let's read through it. This paragraph 5A includes payment of compensation to the other broker working with the buyer. Complete both 1 and 2. So number 1 says, when earned and payable, seller will pay broker what? Well, because you're having to pay both sides, maybe it's 3, 4, 5, or 6%, or a flat fee, maybe $20,000, whatever you're going to share with the other broker. Okay, so that's the total between the brokers. And what it says here, if broker does not pay the other broker that procures a buyer as specified in 5A2, which is here, broker's fee in paragraph 5A1 will be reduced by any amount not paid to the other broker. So what the heck does that mean? I had to read it a couple of times and I was reviewing it over the weekends, and I posted a video on the YouTube on going through these slides if you want to review them. And I think it's right about 30 minutes. The situation is your seller has put on the listing agreement 6%, 3 and 3. And the buyer's rep says their buyer's going to pay them 3%. They don't need your help as a seller. They're going to pay their own commission. Well, guess what? You don't get the entire 6%. You get 6% less what you put down here, the 3%, unless you amend the agreement that says now you get the full 6%, which you could do. But what it's saying just in general, if you don't pay the other buyer's agent, you don't get the whole thing unless you amend it. Now, paragraph 2, red is out, blue is in. If the other broker procures a buyer that purchases the property, seller authorizes the broker to pay, and broker will pay the other broker the following fees from the amount specified in 5A1, and we said it was 6%. So we're going to pay them 3%. Or if we say $20,000, we'll pay them $10,000. I don't work with subagents normally, but if you do, you can put their percentages here. Now, the other thing they've added, seller authorizes a broker to publicly disclose compensation for the other broker as specified in 5A2. Okay, so you can now tell them that you're offering a commission. Without that, you're not supposed to disclose it. Now, why wouldn't they want you to disclose it? Who knows? I can't come up with a good reason why they wouldn't want you to help market their house. But it does say that you can talk to the other brokers about it. Okay. And number 4, broker will retain amount specified in 5A1 as broker's fees if there is no other broker that procures the buyer, including but not limited to transactions where broker represents both seller and buyer, intermediary, or buyer is unrepresented. Amount specified in 5A2 will be applied towards any fee a buyer has agreed to pay broker as specified in a separate written representation agreement. Okay. So the bottom line is if you're paying the other broker, the full amount goes here or here, and the partial amount that you're paying to the other side goes here or here.
And so if we get a buyer that does not want representation and wants to make an offer, we have to amend our listing agreement to get both sides?
Yes, you would. Yes, you
Okay.
would. Or you get it, whatever you put in here, it goes away. It's up to you. I'd want both sides, obviously.
I would.
Wait, can you repeat
I
that
do.
question again?
Go
Can
ahead.
you repeat that question?
Yeah.
My question was pertained to getting both sides of the deal. So as a listing agent, if you have an unrepresented buyer, and you're working both sides as an intermediary, you would have to amend your listing agreement in order to get the BAC portion of commission.
And I
Without that,
concur
you would
with-
you
yeah,
would
I
forfeit it
concur with that.
otherwise.
Yeah, I concur with that. So I think this is going to be one of those areas that will probably be modified again once we start working through it because it is still kind of vague. And I think this paragraph 4 is still vague, but I think they will amend it because lawyers much smarter than I, and I am not a lawyer, will come up with that. Oh, what about this? What about this? But right now it's smart to amend it so that you get both sides.
Okay.
Okay, because the way I read it that paragraph 4 covers that, but just to cover all bases, I certainly amend it.
And that's what I'm saying. Cover all your bases. Okay. Believe it or not, there was one small change here or a flat fee. We went over that. Now here we had some changes on page 3. Red is out, blue is in. Note authorization to disclose. Now this was actually paragraph 11F of the listing agreement that was modified June 24th. They just put it up here. So this is saying that the seller does or does not allow you to disclose to other brokers that you're offering a commission. And it's even here as well, why they actually put it twice. Call it legalese, I don't know, but it's here twice, okay? So we now have to go all the way to page 7, where the other changes were done. Go to page 7. And all they did here was struck this out. So it says we're on page 7, 11D. Disseminate information about the property to other brokers and to prospective buyers, including offers of compensation to buyers' reps. And so they took that out. Some legal guy or legal lady must have seen that, so let's strike it. So that was taken out. And the last thing that did on this document was, remember, I mentioned paragraph 11F. This is now all gone, and it's back on page 3 right there. That's what they've done. So those are, believe it or not, all the changes to the listing agreement. Now, you go back to June 24th, there was more than that, but those were the major changes since June 24th. Okay. All right.
So we don't have to disclose to the buyer's agent that the sellers, what their sellers paying or not, is that correct?
You don't have to, no.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't have to now. it's up to your seller what, we're all. It's funny because I've always carried myself as a sales rep because that's what I did in my former career. So selling is about negotiating. And it is your job as an agent to get the best deal for your buyer or seller. So if I'm
Right.
representing a seller and I can keep a percent in his pocket, absolutely I'm going to do that because he's my client. The buyer's not my client. And I will negotiate with the agent to do the best deal for my seller. And I will sit with my seller in the living room and say, if you allow me to use my negotiation skills, I might be able to save you a few bucks. And if he says, do it, then I'm going to do that. But if he says, no, just give him the 3%, tell him 3% up front, just do it. Then that's what I'll do. Whatever my seller
Okay,
wants.
so what do I do if I get an offer from them and with a 3% commission? And when I had a listing agreement, there was no 3% commission. What do I do? Do I still present that offer?
Of course you do. You have to.
Oh, yeah, but anyway, what do I do about the commission?
Well, what you do is you present it to your seller and you say they want 3%, and you ask the seller if they agree to that, right? And if the seller says no, there's your answer. If the seller says yes, then they sign the 1-4 or the condo document or the farm to ranch with that compensation on it. They sign the compensation agreement between brokers. Then you have to go in and amend your listing agreement to say that you're going to pay both sides.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. I know
This is so confusing. It's even confusing us. I would like the clients would be even more confused. But anyway,
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Our lives have become a little bit more difficult. Okay, let's look at the next form that I think is important to look at. Let's look at the 1501. Not that the other ones aren't important, but we all have busy schedules. I want to get through as many as possible. Let's look at the long form. So put on your buyer's hat for a second. This is the old buyer's rep agreement. Now they call it the long form, and we will go over the short form. So the long form. So where were the changes on the long form? Here it is right here. So on page 2, and you know it's going to be having to do with compensation. So all we're doing is representing the buyer, and look what it says here. Whew. Broker's compensation or the sharing of compensation. You remember me reading that before? It says broker is prohibited from receiving compensation for brokerage services from any source that exceeds the amount stated in this agreement. Okay, and that's where that question about bonuses comes into play, or if the seller is offering more. And if that's the case, you've got to amend the buyer's agreement. So we'll stay on this one for a second. The buyer's fees. When earned and payable, client will pay broker what? Purchases X% of the sales price or a flat fee of, so let's say 3% or $10,000 or whatever you negotiate. And then leases are also covered here in the second line, number 2. Okay. So this is where the compensation is talked about. You need to talk to your buyers about it so they understand. And then look at this paragraph 7B, source of compensation. Broker will seek to obtain payment of the fees specified in paragraph 7A, that's this one here, first from the seller, landlord, or their agents. If such person refuse or fail to pay broker the amount specified, client will pay the broker the amount specified less any amounts broker receives from such persons. So let's put it this way. Your buyer puts 3% up there and the seller pays 2%. Then the buyer is responsible for the other 1%. Unless you forgive it and you amend the buyer's rep agreement down to 2%. Okay? So that's what
Quick
this
question.
is. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you approach amending how would you recommend amending a representation agreement or having the conversation with a buyer, particularly like with new construction, where in some cases there are pretty generous bonuses that are offered?
Yes.
Like that's really tricky.
Yes, it is, because they may not agree to it, right?
Right.
Your buyer may not agree to it. So that question came up a couple weeks ago, and someone much more brilliant than I, who's been in the business much longer than I, said the following. You say, Mr. Buyer, the builder is offering me a bonus for me to do the work for you. And if you choose not to give me that bonus, it stays with the listing agent. So it stays with the builder. So the money just disappears basically, or it goes to the listing agent or whoever is the, those people who sit in the model homes, you know what I'm saying? Those, the
Right,
people.
right.
Or what you say is the following, after you put that to me, say, or why don't we work a deal out because my broker United will allow me to give you part of that bonus back if you have to have that conversation. Because you would not believe the number of CDAs I put in. I did one this morning for a new build where they gave $5,000 of that bonus to the buyer. They did.
Yeah.
And they got the rest of it.
Okay.
So that's what I would tell them. Otherwise, the money just disappears. Why not try to get some of it, right? Or maybe they just have a great relationship. Yeah, Danny, you earned that money. Get it, right? Okay. So I think, give me 1 second. I will look at my, yeah, there's a paragraph page. Okay, here's some other changes down here. All right. Paragraph 2, the number was added. Paragraph 3, other compensation. Only insert amounts or rates of compensation that are objectively ascertainable and the specific amount or rate is known at the time of the execution. Do not insert bonuses, a range of compensation, or terms such as TBD, because down here, so notice regarding bonuses, in addition to broker's fee specified under paragraph 7A, seller, landlord, or their agents may offer to pay broker a bonus if client purchases or leases certain properties. Broker will disclose the specific amount of any bonus offered to broker. Broker may not receive any bonus unless authorized by client in writing. And that's where the amendment to the buyer's rep agreement actually has that paragraph, and I'll show it to you. Okay, so that is actually highlighted now. And then there was something on page, there it is, yeah. Page 3 had this small little typo here. So those were the major changes on the long form. Now I want to show you guys the short form. Give me 1 second. That was not updated, I don't think. Yeah, there it is, the short form. The buyer's rep short form. Okay. New document entirely. You see it's 1 page versus a 5-page. So this is how it reads. Parties, this agreement is made between the client, say Joe Smith, and Danny Elms, United Real Estate, or United Real Estate. Client appoints broker as client's real estate agent subject to the terms of this agreement. Definitions. So we're talking about the market area. You could put, what I try to tell people is you don't want to be too vague, because the only time it really matters is if you have to go into mediation. Because if you were to say DFW, someone might say, what the heck is DFW? We all know it's Dallas-Fort Worth here, but a mediator might say that's too vague. So try to be specific. But you see here what it says. Market area means that area in the state of Texas specified as follows. For example, insert property address, subdivision, city, county, zip code, etc. What I tend to do is I put Dallas County, Collin County, Tarrant County, Denton County, Rockwall County. Okay, that's what I put on mine, because that's where I tend to sell. Now, however, let's skip down to this really quick. Come back to number 3, showing services right here. That's where I am, okay? Showing services. Broker obligations, showing service. Paragraph 6, 7, and 8 do not apply. Stop there for a second. So paragraph 6 doesn't apply, which means client works exclusively through the broker in acquiring property in the market area. 7, no compensation. Hold that thought for a second. And number 8, no intermediary. So what the heck would I be doing then as a showing service? Let's read through it. Paragraph 6, 7, and 8 do not apply. Broker will provide the buyer, client, with access to the properties in the market area, which was up here. Remember me mentioning this right up here? So let's say, for example, you're meeting someone to show a house 123 Main Street in Dallas. Then you type in right here somewhere, 123 Main Street, Dallas, Texas, 75240. That's the only house you're going to show them. And you're going to put on here, what? Look at this. This agreement begins on, put today's date, and it ends today's date. So you show them that one house for one day, because that's all you're doing. You're a showing service. The term that was used when I took this class back on like June 26th was you're an Uber agent. Uber agent. Okay. So you could use a short form showing service to do that. Now, the second part of the showing service, look at it says, client, that's the buyer, will pay broker, that's you, a fee of, and there's a blank there, due upon execution of this agreement. What does that mean? Well, you're opening that door. So do you expect to be paid to open that door? I didn't drive all the way over to, let's say, Irving to work for free. So I'm going to expect, if all they want me to do is open that door for them, I want my gas mileage. I want the wear and tear on my tires. I want my, I'm a professional. I want money for that. So I'm not charging $50.
Do they make that out to you directly? They make it out to you directly?
Yeah. How do I get that money? The retainer fee, how do I get it? Zelle or?
You can do Zelle. You can do a check. You can do cash.
And I have to report to you?
We're still waiting on that answer. I'm waiting on our executives to tell me, because they might say, you know what, if it's less than $50, we don't care. Because if what we have to do here, as you probably can guess, I'm holding my head right now because Bridget, who sits 3 doors down from me, she's by herself as an accountant. And if we now have to start bringing $50 into the office and her taking, let's say, 10% of it and give you 45 back or whatever, that's a nightmare. But right now I'm saying, just get the money, show them the house, and we'll worry about it later. Okay. And they can Zelle it to you. They can write you a check. They can give you cash, or you can put 0 there. You don't have to collect any money. You can do it for free. So why would you do it for free? Let's say the example I gave earlier where the agent here has a house in Fort Worth. He wants you to open the door for him. Okay. He's going to pay you $50 to open that door. We do it all the time. And you'll open that door for free for the person who's wanting to see the house. That's possible. Okay. So don't be afraid to put 0 there. Now,
So maybe this form is for people who you want to gain that client, maybe, like you put 0, I'll show it to you. But we used to do, or at least I used to do, I don't usually sign them, give me this paper, sign this and this. I try to get them to like me first. I don't know. Could we use that option maybe?
Is this Steve?
Yeah, that's me, Steve, yes.
Yeah, I thought that was your voice. Yep, you're Steve, you're absolutely right. And I've already thought that this will be my business model as well. I did Redfin referrals for a bit before I started moving in the office to work, where Redfin would give me referrals, and I told them I'll show homes in Addison, where I live, Farmers Branch, Irving, Carrollton, or Richardson. That was my 5 little suburbs. And I would run out there to show any house they sent to me. I didn't have to have a buyer's rep agreement. I didn't. But now I would. And I would put $0 in there to try to get them as a client. But if they say, for example, I've already got a buyer's rep, I just want you to show me the house, I'm going to say, give me some money then.
$500 per showing.
Yeah. Otherwise they can't get in the house. They can. Yeah.
You would have the check made out to United Real Estate, or because it says a broker.
Yep, it says to the broker. So I would have it made to United Real Estate. You bring it in here, and we'll figure out how to do it. And again, I laugh because I don't have the answer yet. So if, for example, they made the check out to you, I wouldn't know about it. You bring it in, we'll talk about it, and I'll have an answer eventually for you. I just don't have it yet. We've got too many things going on just with not just this, but everything.
Okay, so if they
The
have
paragraph, I think it cuts down on looky-loos, just out wasting your time if you just want to give them showing services, or those that are kind of using multiple agents to do different things.
Yeah.
I think the showing service is actually a good thing. And then what about if you are like Showami, you know, things like that? You still have to have a buyer's rep, because those are people who are represented by someone else, and you're just helping them out. How does that
Correct.
work?
Well, that's a good question because Showami has come up. Is it Showami, Showami? I don't know officially how they call themselves, but yes. The buyer's rep agreement is with whoever they signed it with, right? And if you are not working on behalf of the seller, if someone's, can someone go on mute so I don't have the backlash? Okay, thank you. So what I'm saying is, if you're not working on behalf of the seller, which means you're doing the open house or you're showing your listing, then you need the buyer's rep agreement regardless. Showami, that's just another showing service. If they ask you to open the door of the house, then you need a buyer's rep agreement. So the bottom line is, if you're not working on behalf of the seller, you need a buyer's rep agreement. Okay. All right. Let's go look at some of the other forms. Let's go back up here, some of the most important ones. Okay, let's look at the amendment to buyer-tenant rep agreement. Okay, amendment to buyer-tenant rep agreement. So again, why would we have this? Well, you might have used this in the past because you needed to extend your buyer's rep agreement, for example, or you need to terminate it early, or now this is the key here, these paragraphs here. So let's look at it. See what this says here for 1507 only. That's the short form we just went through. Broker's obligations in paragraph 5 is changed to full service or changed to showing service. Okay, so that's how you move between the two with this amendment to the buyer rep agreement. Or the client does or does not authorize broker to act as an intermediary. Okay, so those will be used for the short form to change it. Now, paragraph D says for the long form, which is 1501, or the short form 1507 only, broker's fees in paragraph 7A are changed to. Okay, so think about this for a second. As Steve kind of mentioned, and I probably would do as well, I want to get my buyer in there at a low cost so they'll trust me and I'll raise it later. Well, I put 0 in there to start, and then we find them a house at 2%. Well, I need to go in here and I need to change it to 2%. And I put in the property address. So I would do this per offer I make or offer I got accepted, okay? And there's leases right behind it. So that's the big change here. And remember, you can amend up or down. Now, here is one caveat, though, that I thought about a couple of days ago when we were talking through it. I just said that I'd probably sign the buyer's rep agreement for 0%, right? And it's my fiduciary responsibility to support that buyer, okay? And what happens is, let's say I find them a house and the seller's not offering any compensation. Well, the buyer's rep agreement said they're not paying me either. So basically, I just negotiated a house for free. And then my broker is going to say I need $644. So I say that because if I put 0 in there, I may need to have to amend it to say at least I need my transaction fees paid by the buyer, sorry. So just be aware of that. Okay. Here's the bonuses. I talked about that a couple times. For the short form or the long form, or vice versa, the long form, short form. Bonuses, in addition to the broker's fee, let me highlight it so you know what I'm talking about. In addition to the broker's fee listed in paragraph 7A, that was of the listing agreement, broker will be paid a bonus from seller, landlord, or their agent amount equal to X if client purchased the property at this address. So that's how you get your bonus with this paragraph right here. And again, it's part of the buyer rep agreement amendment. And it is number 1505, and there's a new date. And you sign it here, and the client sign it here. And that's why you get your bonus. And if you got to split your bonus with them, like I said earlier, for them to give it to you, tell us that on the blue sheet, and we'll put it on the CDA to the title company to give the buyer some of your bonus.
Could you, is there a way to head that off if you know that they only want to look at one builder and you know that builder is offering, say, $8,000 bonus? Could you write that up in your initial buyer's rep agreement?
Well, the buyer's rep agreement did kind of allude to that, but it said it can't be vague. Okay, so if, for example, you were working with a builder that offered $8,000 bonus on every house in their community, then I think you're okay. Okay. But if they're doing 8,000 on one and 5,000 on the other, that's not specific, right? You can't say 5,000 or 8,000. You with me? So if you were to write 8,000 in there and it turned out it was 5,000, you're going to have to amend it.
Right, but just to head it off, if I knew they wanted to focus on this particular community and I knew this is what they were offering and they were looking to pull the trigger pretty quickly, could you just write it in the initial agreement?
Yes, you could. Yes, you could. And just remember, whatever you write in the initial buyer's rep agreement is the max that you can be paid. Okay. Unless you amend it. Okay. The other ones, let's talk. We talked about compensation agreement between brokers, important one right here. And if any of you've ever done a lease in this office, you might have heard this as this document was called agreement between brokers prior. So they changed it to compensation, and it's now 823. And what they added here for this time is they use the term a flat fee of. But let's look through it, okay? The parties up here at the top, listing broker, cooperating broker. So again, this is probably the document that a buying agent will send over to you with the offer. Okay, and again, you can negotiate it. Property address here. Registration, you've seen this before. They register their client, the buyer, with the principal broker. Term, this agreement begins on, and I always tell people, try to put it a couple of weeks after the initial closing date, just in case the closing gets pushed for whatever reason. That gives you a couple of days of breathing room so you don't have to amend this document. Cooperating brokers fees. Fees, when earned and payable, listing broker will pay the cooperating broker for a sale or a lease, sale here, lease right below it, a percentage or a flat fee. Okay, again, right there, same as before. Number 3 was, let's say you're paying something not in cash, and who knows, it's hard to come up with an example, but let's say the seller saying dining room set with 6 chairs. They get the chairs, you get the dining room set, who knows? I don't see that'll be in there many times where maybe they're giving, I don't know, 2 Monets away and you get one and they get the other. So this is a compensation agreement between brokers. And you see here at the bottom, listing broker signs here, cooperating broker signs here. And this ratifies how much the seller is paying to the broker, United in our case, and of how much United is going to give of that total fee to the buying agent. That's what this document's all about. This is a 2402.
When do you fill this out? Before the offer is actually made or during the offer?
It depends. I don't think there is a definitive right answer because I was told this, it was either yesterday or Friday. One of our agents said they had a listing and the buying agent actually sent the compensation agreement between brokers over to have our agent sign even before they sent the offer over. I said, no way are you going to sign that. No way. No way. You tell them to send the offer over and you'll review it with your seller. And if you like it, send over the compensation agreement between brokers. That's one way to do it. But there's no right specific way, Steve, when this is to be sent over. I think it really depends upon the relationship the 2 agents have together. If it's a very trusting relationship, we hope, then they send it over and it's all negotiable. If it's not a trusting relationship, it's kind of gone sideways, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So there's just not the 100% right answer when it's going to come over. You know, some may forget it entirely and you're sitting at title and title asks for it. Okay. So now that's the compensation agreement between brokers. If we were to look at 2406, this is the one that was asked earlier, what the difference is between the two of them, okay? Addendum regarding brokers' fees. So before I go through it, look who signs 2406, buyers, sellers. Do you see anywhere the agent signed this document? No. So 2402 is signed by the agents, 2406 is signed by the buyer and the seller. So let's read it. Property address up here at the top, no surprise there. Okay, addendum. If any part, let me highlight it so you know what I'm looking at. If any part of this addendum conflicts with the provision in the contract, this addendum will control. Okay, so keep that in mind. So if the seller or the buyer is at title saying, no, I didn't agree to that. Well, if you've got this document signed by both the buyer and the seller, well, yes, they did. Okay. All right. Next thing, fees. Fees, sorry, people just keep walking by the office here. Cash fees as specified in the addendum will be paid in Dallas County. That's where our office is. No surprise there. Listing broker fees. Seller shall pay listing broker the fees specified in a separate written representation agreement between seller and listing broker. And that is the exclusive right to sell or the exclusive right to lease, right? Seller shall pay listing broker fees. Okay. So other broker fees. What is this one talking about? Let's look at it. Other broker fees will be paid as specified below, and buyer shall pay any remaining amount due to the other broker specified in a separate written agreement between other broker and buyer. Okay, so what does that mean? It means on the left-hand side of the page, remember, was the listing side, right-hand side was the buyer side of the slide several ago. So it's saying we had the buyer sign a buyer's rep agreement that gave us 3%, but the seller's only going to pay 2%. That means the buyer's got to pay the other 1%. That's what that's saying. And it's in a separate, different agreement. But let's go down here. Let's read number D again. Other broker fees will be paid as specified below, and buyer shall pay any remaining amount due to the other broker. Okay. But maybe it's all covered because we go check all that apply. The first one says, let's click on it. Sorry, if I can get it highlighted. There we go. Number one, listing broker versus right down here, it says seller. So number one is listing broker, that's us, shall pay X amount of dollars or a percent of the sales price as contained in a separate written compensation agreement between listing broker and other broker. And there it is, 2402, compensation agreement between broker. So what we're saying is the seller and the buyer did not necessarily see the compensation agreement between brokers. Maybe you shared it with them. You're able to do that. But it's saying the listing broker will pay the buyer's broker an amount of money specified in 2402. Okay. So that should be telling the buyer, yes, my buyer's agent is earning a commission from the seller or the listing broker that I am no longer responsible for if it matches what is on my buyer's rep agreement. And if it doesn't match what's on my buyer's rep agreement, I need to have it amended. So that's number one. What is number 2A? Okay. Seller shall pay, so stop for a second, versus listing broker shall pay. So the listing broker shall pay means the seller paid it all to the listing broker unit in our case, and we doled it out to the buyer's broker. In this case, the seller is going to pay because the seller did not pay the listing broker dollars to pay the buyer's broker. Okay. So the seller shall pay, again, almost the same words, dollar figure or percentage of sales price contained in a separate written agreement between seller and other broker, such as a 2401. Okay. The 2401, what the heck document is that? That is the compensation between buyer buyer's broker, between broker and seller. So that's for FSBOs. So this paragraph here is best used for FSBOs. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Paragraph B says what? Same kind of verbiage. Dollars or percentage of sales price toward other brokers' fees. That means the seller will pay it. Note, use this option only there if there is no separate written compensation agreement between seller and other broker. Okay. This option creates a new obligation for the seller. So if the seller doesn't have the compensation agreement between broker for the FSBO, or maybe, for example, for whatever reason, maybe we forgot to amend the listing agreement. Let's say our listing agreement initially had that the seller would pay no buyer's compensation. And then through the negotiations, the sellers agreed to pay buyer's compensation. Okay. Well, we didn't amend the listing agreement to say that, but now we're going to go down here and say, yes, the seller has agreed to pay that amount of money, and this addendum overrides the others. Okay. That's what that's for. Then you've got the intermediary broker's fees. In addition to any fees seller has agreed to pay listing broker in a separate written representation agreement, seller shall also pay listing broker X or percent of sales price. Amount specified in this paragraph E shall be applied toward any fees buyer has agreed to pay listing broker in a separate written representation agreement. Buyer shall pay any remaining amounts due to listing and broker specified in a separate written representation agreement. Use this option only if listing broker represents seller and buyer as intermediary. This option creates a new obligation for the seller. Okay. A lot of words there, but it's basically if you're an intermediary. If you're not an intermediary, don't worry about it. Okay. Paragraph F, they took compensation out there. So that is hopefully helps you guys understand the difference between the two, 2402 and 2406. 2406, which is this one, obligates, because remember this, the compensation agreement between compensation agreement between brokers is signed by the two agents. You never know, because it happened here a couple of years ago where one of the agents called me and she's sitting at title and the seller has stated, I nowhere agreed to pay the buyer's agent's compensation. No, I didn't. And I asked our agent, do you have the compensation agreement between broker and owner? And she didn't. So she worked that deal for free. Okay. All right. Let's look at another one. It's 329. We may have time for a couple more. Okay, let's look at the ones from June 27th. There's the amendment to listing. We'll look at that one quickly. So you've got the listing agreement, and we've kind of alluded to this a couple times. The listing agreement, for example, says, paragraph C, the broker's fee is changed in paragraph 5A1 or 5B1. That was how much they were paying. Let's say they were paying 6% initially. Now they're only going to pay 5%. Or they want to change how much they're paying the other agent. That's really the big changes here. That's the amendment to listing. Again, there's the date. It didn't change since 6/24. A lot of blue ink on here from when it was initially changed. All right. There's a short form. We went over that one. Let's look at the FSBO. This one is 2401. And it's quite a lengthy document, but this is the agreement you're going to sign if you are the buying agent and you want to get the owner to ensure that they pay your compensation. Okay. So you might have seen this before. It's not a new document. It was called registration before, now it's called compensation. But I want to look at another one real quick before we lose time. Find it. It's up here. Oh, here it is. Notice from buyer's agent to seller, and all the years that I've been working with you guys on the forms, I have yet to see this one come across that I can recall in any of the transactions. But it's not a new form. It's been around since April 26th of 2004. So what does it say? Notice from the buyer's agents to the seller. So initially I thought, oh, okay, this is for an FSBO, right? And you go to the seller from the broker United, we're the buying broker at the property. And it says, your real estate broker has asked that I deliver the enclosed offer to you. Well, if it's a FSBO, there is no real estate broker. So I'm going, okay, well, then who's it for? Well, I struggle with that answer. So I'm still thinking it's for the FSBOs. And it says, my client is a prospective buyers. I am obliged to inform my client of any material information you provide to me. Okay. And this is where the important part is here, because I was talking to someone just yesterday that this might come in handy. I will not provide you with anything in these 7 paragraphs. Okay. Then number 7, or I'm sorry, number E. I encourage you to contact your broker or your attorney for assistance. TREC rules provide that a broker is obligated under a listing agreement to negotiate the best possible transaction price for the principal seller. So I was just interested in this one because I've never seen it before. It's been around since 20 years, but it's kind of interesting, and they did modify it by putting this little informational blurb in there. All right. So to wrap up here, because we are up on the hour and a half, and that's all I really ask you guys to give me today. Let's go back to, let's go here. Let's see if I can finish up the slide deck because we're almost done. Let's go back to your screen sharing, share this. Okay. Next slide. What things I've got to do for you guys over the next couple of days. Examples of how to fill out the new forms will be added to Paperless Pipeline in the coming days. I've already added many of the forms that were modified June 26th, and they're on Paperless under Reference tab, NAR modification forms and revisions or something like that. And a lot of examples are already there. I've got to do examples of the forms that were modified this coming weekend. And I will do that. I promise you I'll do that. And with that, that's our last slide. So it's a lot of information. I appreciate y'all hanging in with me. Any questions?
Yes, I have a listing that it was executed on June 24th, 2024. Do I still need that amendment, or date was 6/24?
If the paper says it's 6/24, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Danny, I have one question.
ahead.
For the listing agreement, if I download the forms from Zip Forms now, they are the updated new forms, so I don't have to worry about it.
That is correct. Now, I'll be honest with you from this perspective. If you were to go to Zip Forms today and pull down the, let's say, the long form, the buyer's reps long form, it's going to show 6/24/24.
Mhm.
If you did it Sunday, it'll show 8/23/24 because it's going to be modified again a little bit. They haven't told us that you're going to have to, if you went under contract with the listing agreement or a buyer's rep agreement today, that you're going to have to modify it. They didn't tell us that yet, but I'm just telling you that in a couple of days, the forms are going to change.
Okay, so it's going to be a listing agreement for our sellers.
Okay.
So should I just then wait till Sunday and do the new one?
If you can wait till Sunday, I would, if that is an option for you. Or actually, it is Saturday. I'm sorry, August 23rd is actually Friday.
Mhm.
So if you log in either Friday or Saturday, the new form should be there.
Okay, thank you so much.
You bet.
I have a quick question. I was wondering if you had a listing for like 7 or 8 months on the old listing contract and the new contract comes up, do you have to come up with a new contract, or does the old one just continue the way it was?
You're talking about when you say contract, you're talking about the listing agreement?
Yes.
You have to do the one form page, the 2701, and you've got to do that now. The 2701 is a one pager that says they did sign an old listing agreement, but the listing agreement is valid by using 2701. It's a one pager, and all you do is it's 3 blanks you fill out. You fill out the date that you originally signed the listing agreement. You put in today's date or whatever date you're modifying it, and then you put the property address, and then they sign it and you sign it and you're done.
I see. What if they don't want to sign it for some reason, and are you still obligated to sell their old listing till the termination date?
Understood. Sitting in this seat, we will do whatever it takes to help you guys. Okay. And if you tell us, Danny, they just refuse to sign it. Okay. Put a note in the transaction that you've produced it to them. You know, you sign it, you put it up there, and we will fight on your behalf to say, look, we try to get them to sign it. They wouldn't. And we're going to sell their house until the expiration date. And we'll work with you. Yep. Anything
Danny,
else?
are there
Yeah.
any mandatory trainings that the agent has to attend by a certain date? Because I was told by my business partner that we need to attend some mandatory trainings for the new NAR rules.
Not that I've been told.
Okay, because she scared me saying that if you don't attend these trainings, your license will be suspended. So I'm like, let me check what's going on there.
No one has mentioned that to me at all. If they had, I'd have been all over that. So no.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You bet.
Can we get legal training for this?
Legal
credit-
training?
Like the
Oh,
credits 2 hours or something.
you can get a credit tomorrow if you come into the new lender's doing an hour training class tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
And we're giving pizza and sodas if you want to come in for an hour of that.
Is that at the
But I-
Frisco location or the Dallas one?
The Dallas. And I'm not authorized to do CE training. I don't have that credential, I guess you call it. So I can't give y'all CE credit.
Well, this was probably even better than CE training.
Well, I appreciate
it
that.
was actually, it was really good. Thank you for this.
Thank you. My pleasure. And again, I'll post it up on the YouTube, and it takes about a day for Zoom to make it available to me. Then I'll post it. And I'm doing the NAR class tomorrow here live, and then we'll do another one and another one until they tell us to quit doing it. Okay? All right. With that, y'all have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.